very heavy breathing, this click mic. Nothing we noticed.
That's up for on that one, isn't it? I think it is. Okay.
Sorry about this. Could you just say something, David?
Yeah? Okay. Anything coming through?
Okay. Just start, David. I'll call Kerry and just check that he can hear it from.
Okay. So we'll begin as usual. Just take a few minutes to settle the body and mind, focus the mind, relax the body, and then begin with the visualization of Guru Shakyamuni Buddha. So strongly think, right now I am actually in the presence of Shakyamuni Buddha, who is identical with my own root guru. As we recite the Heart Sutra, really try to adopt the mind of someone hearing this as it was spoken for the first time. Try to hear the words freshly, however many times you may have heard them in the past. Let them strike you with the same force that they would have struck those who first heard this sutra when it was spoken by the Buddha. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on Mass of Vultures Mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odour, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared: Tayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharadvatiputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. And once again, just concentrate on the visualization of Guru Shakyamuni Buddha in front. Try to make it as clear as you can. So even though you may find visualization not so easy, then at least make effort to adopt the point of view that, however imperfect your visualization, nevertheless, if you have a mind of faith, Shakyamuni Buddha is here, in reality, in front of you, in a subtle form. So as we recite the refuge and bodhicitta lines, really think I'm doing this in the presence of Shakyamuni Buddha himself. And also that Shakyamuni Buddha is no different from your own root guru. So also think my guru is here. They are one and the same being. Sangye chudang soki chonam la changchu padu dagni kam suche dagi chunyen gi peso nam gi chola penche sangye drukpa shok Sangye chudang soki chonam la changchu padu dagni kyam suche dagi chunyen gi peso nam gi chola penche sangye drukpa shok Sangye chudang soki chonam la changchu padu dagni kyam suche dagi chunyen gi peso nam gi chola penche sangye drukpa shok. So very strongly think, now I have taken refuge, made a commitment to follow the Mahayana spiritual path. So this is the occasion for great joy. So this path is not something that is an onerous burden, but something that will bring you continuous happiness from lifetime to lifetime until enlightenment. And especially generating the mind of bodhicitta is a cause of tremendous happiness for yourself and many, many other, in fact, limitless sentient beings. So please try to generate a very happy mind, whatever level, degree of refuge and bodhicitta motivation you are able to generate at this time. Shakyamuni Buddha now comes to the crown of your head. His body is the nature of golden light. It dissolves into your body, flowing down your central channel into your heart, bringing blessing and inspiration into your heart, into your root mind. So feel that all problems, all conflicts, impurities, confusion and delusion are dissolved into emptiness. Your mind merges with the mind of your Guru, resting in that space of serenity and peace of the Dharmakaya. Meditate on space like emptiness. And gently relax your concentration. Thank you. So, let's get the little gadget out.
David, could you just double check your mic? Phil said he could hear you, but perhaps...
Right, it is switched on. So the box is on.
Okay.
Are you getting sound from either mic?
He said he could hear you, but perhaps it wasn't very loud, but I don't know.
Okay.
But I think it's fine. He said it was fine, but I just...
Okay. We'll do our best. So, right, I tuned into the live stream the other day to listen to Kerry, but it wasn't there. So, did it get put on?
No,
I couldn't find it.
didn't switch it on.
Ah.
We all agreed.
Oh, did you? Okay. Right. So therefore, I don't know what he said or what you asked him, but I thought it would be good to start with just a little bit of time for any more questions on that topic, particularly, or what's happening? This is not right. Technology, eh? Okay, I guess that's right. Yeah. So, anything that came up particularly last time, or anything in general on this important topic of following the spiritual teacher? Or anything that's come up in the meantime? Everything totally straightforward.
That's straightforward.
Well, you can't remember.
I wasn't here last.
Oh, you weren't? Okay. It's interesting. I mean, yes, I've been away in London, attending some teachings by two very remarkable women, Kandra Rinpoche and Tenzin Palmo. Tenzin Palmo particularly spoke quite a lot about this topic, and one of the things that kind of quite startled me was that, I mean, do you all know about her?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So she was the first Western woman to become a fully ordained Buddhist nun. There are very few fully ordained Buddhist nuns anywhere in the world, actually. So she was the first from the West. and she lived in a monastery in India, in Ladakh, for 6 years, which is not an easy thing to do in the 1960s. I mean, to anybody living in a monastery, a Tibetan monastery in India in the 1960s, was pretty tough. No woman had ever done this, but no woman, never mind a Westerner, and certainly, you know, just living in none of the people, practically none of the people there spoke any English, and they didn't understand about, you know, have it, like, you know, it was very, very difficult, extremely difficult. Then she practiced with a group of very realized yogis in another part of Ladakh for another 6 years, and then she went into retreat. So she did a 3-year retreat, and then immediately another one, and then immediately did another one, and immediately another one. So she was in retreat continuously for 12 years in a cave, and high up in the Himalayas. And since then, she's been really recognized as a High Lama. She's given the title Jetsunma by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which is a title that is bestowed on very, very few people. So she's really quite an outstanding practitioner. And she said very clearly, she was talking about this, about the guru. And one of the things that she said was, if anybody asks me, you know, will you be my teacher? I say no, because I don't consider that I'm qualified. And I'm sure she was not just saying that. She really meant it. So that was interesting. Because it kind of, you know, throws some light on the depth of this concept of the guru. And I know what she's saying is, you know, that to be able to guide someone, strictly speaking, you know, a fully qualified guru should be able to guide you all the way to enlightenment. So they should be able to deal with any of the problems that come up anywhere along that path. And there are, you know, this is, so that's a very, very deep matter indeed. So it's interesting that somebody like that, you know, who is, I mean, she is highly respected by Tibetan lamas. It's not just, you know, from the point of view of being unusual for a Westerner, but she is really, you know, held in high respect. But she was very clear, you know. So she said it's very difficult to find a fully qualified guru. Really very difficult. And of course, if you find one nowadays, it's often very difficult to receive teachings from them kind of, you know, one-to-one in person, which is the way that it tends to be presented in the text, you know, as if you can do that. And of course that was much easier to do in Tibet in the old days. It was still something, I think, that, you know, it was the very serious practitioners who really did that. But it was much more available then. She certainly seems to feel much more available then than it is now. So she spoke for some time. She spoke at some length on this topic, and her advice, very strong advice, was, you know, this is to actually be able to find a living spiritual teacher that we can relate to in this way is very unusual good karma, you know. And we should not let that stand in our way of our practice. So basically, you know, if we don't feel we've got that kind of very fortunate connection at the moment, we don't have somebody available that we can go and put our questions to, who we are confident has that level of realization, we should practice anyway. And there are lots of, you know, there are lots of wonderful teachings available on the internet, and there are lots of, you know, good, competent teachers who we can receive, you know, basic Dharma teachings from. They may not be, you know, able to guide us through the high levels of realization on the tantric path, but so, you know, we can practice with respect and, you know, really sort of have an open mind that they may be enlightened even though we can't quite see it at the moment. But the biggest thing I think that she was saying was, don't feel, I can't really get started until I find this special guru who is going to lead me step by step along the path, because then you'll never find them. Because you're not creating the course to find them. So you create the course to find them by, from your side, having real sort of strong motivation and practicing in a disciplined way, and also making prayers. One of the things she's, his advice about how do we find one? One thing is pray sincerely from your heart. I'm doing my best, but I do need, in order to really make progress on the spiritual path, I need some more kind of, that kind of help from someone who's really qualified, and just ask for the help of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to help you to find them. But very much, emphasizing this thing of, we need to be very careful to make that kind of heart commitment. So that's not the same as, on the one hand, that the teachers like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, in my mind, there's absolutely no question that they're qualified. It's not very easy to access them. So we can practice this. We can do this practice of guru devotion. It's not, we can't. It's difficult at that kind of distance to have that sort of real heart devotion that is talked about in the text. But we can work on it. It's like develop it gradually, fake it till you make it, sort of thing. The good thing about those more distant figures is that, as Thupten Jinpa pointed out, and others have said the same thing, is much less risk of falling into the problem of having negative thoughts about your guru if they're a long way away. If they're very close by, we can easily think, oh, look, he's done that, and then we have to kind of sort of work to unpick that our conceptual mind playing tricks, because that's really what it is, So I think this is probably going to be an ongoing theme, because it's such a, in the way that the Dharma is taught in the Tibetan tradition. It's not only the Tibetan tradition, actually. It's really, I think people think this is a Tibetan thing, this guru devotion, but it isn't. I think you can say, if you look at all of the Mahayana Buddhist traditions, it's very, very important. It's very, very important in Zen. It's very important in the other forms of Chinese and Japanese Buddhism. Guru devotion, it's kind of, talked about in a little bit different way, but it's really the same. It's really the same. And there is a slight difference between Mahayana and Theravada or Hinayana traditions in that regard. In the Theravada and the Hinayana traditions, it is very much taught that we should have respect for the spiritual teacher, treat them with respect, and take good care of them, be considerate towards them. But this sort of devotional practice to the guru is not taught in the same way, and it has to do with the fundamental difference between the two paths. It has to do with the fact that in a Mahayana tradition, the goal is complete enlightenment. It's not just liberation. It's not just nirvana. And that has to do with why the guru devotion is so important in not just in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, but in all the, as far as I know, in all the Mahayana Buddhist traditions that I know anything about. It's the same. So it's a deep practice. And at the moment, I think maybe our attitude should be that we hold the aspiration to be able to practice with that kind of devotion. At the moment, for a lot of us, it's very difficult to really do that. So we shouldn't kind of feel, I read this about some incredible guru devotion that some Tibetan person had, but my guru devotion isn't as good as that. That's awful. We shouldn't think that at all. But really, just it's a little bit more in the background of our practice because we don't have that situation. The gurus are more further away, so we need to focus on the foundation practices and hold that as an aspiration for the future, because when we do reach into the slightly more advanced level on the spiritual path, it becomes much more important. It becomes vital. There comes a point where we cannot go beyond a certain point without that really deep sort of heart guru devotion. It's you can read about in the biographies of all the Zen masters and people, that it's very similar. It's not as different as sometimes people think. So I think, the kind of take-home message is, yes, this is a really important practice. So we shouldn't forget that, but don't get too hung up about it at this stage if it's like the circumstances are not all as conducive for us as they are for, some people in Tibet and other places. If you're fortunate enough to find one that you can relate to directly, then fantastic, wonderful. But, as I say, it comes first in the Tibetan presentation. For example, in the Discovering Buddhism, it comes quite early on in that program, but here we teach it much later, because for people who are beginning Dharma students in the West, I think it's not so appropriate to put it right at the beginning. I think people can't relate to it so easily as they can to many of the other teachings. So we put it further on. So, having spoken about it a little bit, any more questions on it before we move on? Are you all happy with it? Good? Excellent. Right, so in a way, and I suppose it's something about the structure of the Lamrim generally a little bit, that so this first topic is, following a spiritual teacher, and it's divided into two parts. First of all, there's the qualities of a spiritual teacher, qualities of the disciple, and so on, and then the second part, how to follow a spiritual teacher, which is all the rest of the Lamrim. Because how to follow a spiritual teacher is to practice Dharma. The main thing. Well, there are some that there's different things. I mean, actually, but in the text it stresses. As you make offerings to the Lama, you of course practicing Guru devotion in thought. We try to view the Lama as definitely fully enlightened, and devotion to the Guru in action. There are many teachings about how we should practice to serve the Guru. And I'll just, I don't know if I may have mentioned about that before, but I'll just say it again, because, again, don't think we can't do this because he's not here physically in this place. Certainly, if we have devotion to Lama Zopa or to Lama Yeshe or to the Dalai Lama, if they're kind of focusing our practice on them, then anything that we do for this Dharma center, we are serving very, very directly. We are serving those gurus, because that was, I think the Dalai Lama, it's quite evident that although he has tremendous responsibilities for, the Tibetan community and so on, and giving so much to them, kind of viewed by them as his absolute savior. Nevertheless, the energy and the effort that he's put in over the last 60 years nearly to working to bring the Dharma to the West, however much he comes and he says, don't become a Buddhist to Westerners. But it's very clear, You know, I mean, he wouldn't be giving so many teachings, initiations, supporting, setting up Dharma centers of different kinds, and dialoguing with Western scientists. He's clearly, you know, views this transmission of the Dharma to the West as profoundly, incredibly important. So anything that we do that is, you know, with a good mind, with a pure mind that is working towards that end, we are very much directly serving His Holiness. Obviously, Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa, you know, incredible selfless dedication that they put into founding all of the Dharma centers and building the FPMT organization, complete dedication to this community that they, especially Lama Zopa, you know, I mean, obviously Lama Yeshe as well, but Lama Zopa over so many years now, unbelievable selflessness that he's given, tireless working to try to help us to build Dharma centers in the West. So anything that we do here, supporting and working for this center, is, you know, is perfect service to the Guru. Very, very important. But then, you know, at the end of that section, Third Dalai Lama says, and of course the best way to serve the Guru, the best way to devote yourself to the Guru is to give the offering of practice, which is just literally to practice the Dharma. So then what do we do? How do we do that? And the whole of the rest of the text is that. You often find this, you know, especially in Lamrim text, but in all the sort of most of the kind of classical Tibetan texts, they have this sort of very, very structured division. It's like a tree of, you know, headings and subheadings and sub-subheadings and sub-subheadings, you know, very, very sort of clear structure, complex structure with, you know, numbered points and so on. And very often you find it's like the whole text is divided into two parts, and the first part is like one page. So like, you know, how to devote oneself to a spiritual teacher, and then final point, and then how we should do this is we should practice Dharma, and then the whole of the rest of the text is about that. Second part, how do we practice? So that's, we're on to that now. We're on to the main body of the Lamrim in a way. And again, it's very like that with the first topic, because the first topic in the Lamrim, so here we are beginning with the so I think mentioned last time that it's divided into three parts with these three levels or three scopes of practice, the three levels of motivation. So from our point of view, we are practicing all of these three with the same motivation, okay? The first one, which is usually called the preliminary practices, well, most of it is the preliminary practices, but these are the practices of the lowest or least scope or the initial motivation, those practices which create the causes for a fortunate rebirth, a human rebirth, a rebirth in the human realm or the Deva realm, the God realm, okay? In order to achieve that kind of rebirth, there's two main kind of sets of causes for it. One is practicing moral discipline, you know, refraining from negative actions and doing positive actions. The other is refuge. So although those are the practices that you would do if your motivation was just to gain a good rebirth, we are practicing those with a bodhicitta motivation, okay? Same practices, different motivation, but they are the foundation for the higher level practices. Without doing the practices of the lower scope, we cannot succeed in the other ones, okay? And so it's the same, then we go on to the intermediate scope, the practices based on the motivation to attain liberation from samsara or nirvana. we need to do those practices well and thoroughly in order to create the foundation to be able to do the special practices of the Mahayana path, the highest scope. Okay. So, as I say, the initial scope or the lowest scope practices, generally there's 4 meditations that we do, and these are called the 4 common preliminaries because they are practiced as preliminaries for the Sutra path, Sutra Mahayana path, and also as preliminaries for the Tantric path. Okay. Then there are some special preliminaries which are just especially a preliminary for the Tantra. So when you do Tantra, you do the common preliminaries and the special preliminaries. So these 4 meditations are the common preliminary practices for the Lamrim. And they are the meditation on the precious human rebirth, meditation on death and impermanence, meditation on suffering, specifically suffering of the lower realms, and meditation on the law of cause and effect karma. Those meditations are practiced in order to develop a very strong motivation, spiritual motivation, to abandon the causes of a lower rebirth and create the causes of a high rebirth. Okay? In other words, as I said before, moral discipline, not engaging in non-virtuous actions and engaging in positive actions, and also refuge, taking refuge in the 3 jewels. So then and that itself, the meditation on refuge, is the other part of the least scope practices. Okay? So the first one is meditation on the precious human rebirth. And as I was getting around to saying, the way that it's put, explained in a lot of the Lamrim texts is, first of all, the text is divided into 2 parts. First of all, cultivating an appreciation of the value of this special human rebirth. Second one is the practices that you do based on that understanding, which is everything else. Okay, so again, it kind of divides it into 2. But in another way, you can look at it as just, this is the first of those 4. But the reason why it's explained like that is because the purpose of meditating on the precious human rebirth is to generate a strong motivation to practice. Because at the moment, although we may feel, this Buddha Dharma is something very wonderful, and we think this is the path that I want to follow, and so on, our motivation is comparatively weak, isn't it? Our ability to practice in a disciplined way, day after day, deepening our practice all the time. Oh, I'm not sure. So that's the purpose. The purpose of this meditation is to really kind of galvanize us into thinking, not just thinking, but really kind of getting it down here. These Lamrim meditations are very much about, a lot of them are things that are in a way really quite obvious from a sort of factual point of view. It's not they're difficult to understand. And we meditate on them not because we don't understand, for instance, that we are mortal. We all understand that. But we don't have a real kind of gut level appreciation of what that means in terms of our life. It doesn't really get to us. And occasionally, once in a while, it does. And we think, wow, So the kind of purpose of doing these meditations over and over and again is to really have that kind of wake-up call feeling all of the time. So that we really apply ourselves to the practice. because it can become very sort of routine, can't it? You know, it's like after a while, after we get to know the practice a little bit, we sit down, we do our meditation, and we kind of go through the motions. Or we do a little bit more than that. But really, this isn't a kind of dynamic experience quite often. I'm speaking very much personally, you know. It takes some work to generate that real feeling of dynamism in our practice. And so that's the purpose, actually the purpose of all of these 4 meditations really, but especially this first one, is that we have this tendency to just kind of coast along. And it's a very natural human tendency, so we shouldn't beat ourselves up about it. You know, it's the same for everybody, or nearly everybody. There's the occasional extraordinary person who's completely motivated from day one, but they are the rare exception, I think. So we have to do some work to generate that real enthusiasm and commitment and energy into our practice, which really means that our practice begins to actually transform our mind. Because otherwise, you know, it has quite a limited effect, really. It's very important. To know that we shouldn't think that just because I get up and sit on my cushion for 20 minutes every day for 10 years, that I'm going to really get somewhere. If there isn't that energy behind it, if there isn't some sort of urgency and commitment, then that really won't do very much. You know, I know people who've been meditating for a very long time, and there doesn't seem to be much sign of deep change. You know. Of course, that could be deceptive. You never know what's going on inside, but sometimes it looks that way. And certainly in my own experience, you know, like there have been times when really not much has happened for years, you know. I'm not saying it's that much different now, but these meditations do help to really sort of put a little bit of fire underneath us, which is what we need. So, you know, if there is a sense of maybe the practice is getting a little bit lukewarm, it's very good to come back and do these, especially these first 2 meditations for some time, and hopefully it will begin to energize our practice a little bit. We really do need that energy. I mean, in order to gain these sort of the real meaning, the real purpose, I mean, the real purpose of this practice is to get enlightened. It's not to just sort of get a little bit more calm and a little bit more, you know, chilled out and then not so, I mean, that's great, you know, if we become a little bit more calm and a little bit more patient with the people around us and so on. This is very good. I mean, it's very important. But that's not what this is really, what this is really about is something much more profound than that. This is, you know, it's not just a story. This really is a method that we can use to get all the way to enlightenment. And that's the purpose, you know, that the intention behind the teachings is to arouse in us that real sort of almost passionate determination to really transform our minds, and so that we understand that this is available. This is not just something that happened in Tibet many years ago. This is also for us. So, and again, you know, we would avoid getting fanatical about it and think, actually, I was reading the biography yesterday of a very great Korean master, Zen master. And this happened to him. You know, he got this tremendous motivation. I can't remember the story about how it happened. Well, I think he was very, very ill. And his friend, who was a Dharma practitioner, you know, said something to him about it that he then met. Well, I really need to do some practice. So he went and he recited the Om Mani Padme Hum for 100 days because he kind of realised that he needed to do something, and it cured him of his life-threatening illness. He wasn't doing it in order to get cured. He was doing it because he thought he needed to do some practice. But it cured him, and that inspired him, and he became very, very sort of, and he, for 3 months, he practiced with incredible intensity. And at the end of it, he was kind of contemplating throwing himself off a cliff because he hadn't got enlightened yet, And then he realised, well, it took Shakyamuni Buddha 6 years, so maybe I'm being a little bit arrogant here, thinking I can do it in 3 months. But I can't remember how I led up to that, but I slightly lost the thread of what I was saying there. But the point was somewhat that, that is something that is available, and so it's about being fanatical. We think, I'm going to get enlightened in 3 months. Well, that is a little bit sort of, no. We need to kind of keep it in perspective and keep it in balance. We need to take into account our life situation and what's practical for us. But in my opinion, to have that aspiration, I want to get enlightened in this lifetime, is not stupid. It's not fanatical. That it's we need to kind of move at a kind of sensible pace and not think, I want to get enlightened in this lifetime, then I need to, leave my job, leave my family, leave the country, go to India, go and live in a cave for the rest of my life. No, not like that. That's extreme. But just to really make that inner decision, I'm going to make this really important, and I'm going to work to slowly, develop my understanding, develop my ability to practice, develop my concentration, and develop, of course, the motivation. That itself is something that we need to work on to build that sort of energy and determination and clarity of purpose, why we are wanting to get enlightened. But we can do all of those things. And over the course of a few years, if we set that ambition, that aspiration for ourselves, our lives may change quite a lot in a positive way. And then it may become more believable, more plausible. This isn't just something for somebody else. This is something for me. It's possible. Very few people do it, but there's no reason why you can't be one of those people. Absolutely no reason. So that's what this meditation is about, this on precious human rebirth, because the first thing that the teachers, the gurus are saying to us is, if you appreciate the fact you do have this opportunity, it is possible, it's available to you, and how rare that is, how unbelievably fortunate we are that we do have this opportunity, because most beings don't. Nobody in the animal realm has the opportunity, they don't. Oh, maybe some kind of unusual sort of animals, I don't know, but generally speaking, as an animal, it's impossible. Now, 99.99% of the beings in this world are animals, aren't they? Practically all the beings in this world. I don't know how many times they outnumber us. They outnumber us by millions and millions and millions of times, don't they? But you could have been born as an animal. You had that good fortune to be born as a human. And think about that. You were floating around in the Bardo 30, 40, 50 years ago, and you could just as well have ended up as a cat or an alligator or something like that. Why didn't you? Do we ever really think about it? Not very often. Well, the answer is because we created the cause to be born as a human. And it's very difficult to do that. You can see, just because 99.999% of the beings are animals, it's logical. It must be very difficult to create the cause to be a human. Much easier to create a cause to be reborn as an animal. I mean, there's a lot of people out there doing it. You can see them. Creating the cause to be reborn as an animal. Or worse. So, if we think about that, if we meditate on that fact, and it becomes real for us, because it is real, this is how it is. Whether you accept rebirth or not, even, just in the abstract, well, here I am, a human being. I could have been an animal. I could have been anything. But I'm not. I'm a human being. Therefore, I have this amazing mind that has a capacity to understand the Dharma. So just for starters, okay. But when we talk about the precious human rebirth, it's very important to understand, it doesn't mean, a human rebirth, that's very precious. No, it's a special kind of human rebirth that we have. That is a precious human rebirth. So we have many other things, not just the fact that we have a human body. We also have many other circumstances which we need in order to be able to practice a spiritual path. And again, most people don't have those circumstances. So traditionally there's a list of 8 freedoms and 10 endowments in this. So this kind of, a lot of the teachings on this topic, the precious human rebirth, are around how rare and unusual it is to receive it, to kind of drive home the point that right now we have an incredible opportunity. We not only, so first of all, it is extremely rare because, to have these 8 freedoms, all of these 8, and all of the 10 endowments, we need all of those. So to assemble all of the causes for all of those karmically is quite difficult. And then in terms of numbers, they compare the number of animals. And of course, from the point of view of Buddhist cosmology, many, 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 many times more of the pretas, the hungry ghosts, than the animals. And many, many, many more times hell beings than the pretas. And again, if you look around and see the karmic causes that people are creating, it's very believable. So, I mean, it's interesting, how seriously we take this Buddhist cosmology. As I say, I don't think it's completely dependent on that, but it is an opportunity to really think about it, because as we kind of sometimes skate over it in Buddhism in the West because people find it difficult and challenging. It's worth looking at, and I'll talk about it some more maybe next time, more in detail, because it really is very much in conflict with our Western worldview, isn't it? It's like these hell realms and spirit realms, Deva realms, and when I think about this question, I think, what makes it real for me is not so much all the graphic descriptions of what it's like in the hell realms and the God realms and all the rest of it, but something about the nature of the mind, and the law of karma, because the way that I understand karma, we can see it and experience it happening in this life. We can see how, when I do something very negative, my experience changes. My sort of it kind of leaves a sort of residue. It's kind of tones my experience. There's a kind of, there's a feeling, a vibration in my experience that's left there after, if I kind of, really shout at somebody or do something that I really shouldn't have done. I start to have negative experiences. And if I do something very positive, I enter into life differently. It conditions the way that my mind is as I enter into life, and it opens up more positive experiences. And we can all observe this, we can all experience this very directly in our daily lives. It's not something that we just have to believe because the Buddha said, oh, this is happening to you because of the karma that you did in a previous life. No, in my understanding, it's something we can see that principle of cause and effect happening and unfolding from moment to moment in our daily life. Every day, like, how you come into life in the morning, what you've done the day before. If you've done lots of good things the day before, then often your experience the next day is much more positive, isn't it? It's very simple, very reasonable. Now, when they talk about the hell realms, the preta realms, and the God realms, whether we find it credible as there's physically some place like that, the Dalai Lama says it's not necessarily like that at all. But those experiences are definitely possible experiences, the experience of intense suffering, that makes perfect sense in terms of if you did really negative things all your life, those are the causes that you're creating, and that's what you're going to experience. There's nothing impossible about that. And we have occasional experiences like that, don't we? And we have occasional experiences that are quite blissful and sort of, So the mind creates its own environment through the way that we come into life, through the way that, the kind of energy that we bring. So to my mind, there's nothing impossible about these hell realms and deva realms. They kind of have to exist, because if that is the potential that we're creating through the actions that we do and through the kind of mindset that we have, that's what we're going to experience. So the Dalai Lama expresses it quite well in his commentary. I won't kind of go into the details, but it's in there. So I think, we may have reasonable doubt, but we shouldn't dismiss it out of hand. It's a very logical, coherent worldview, actually, when we think about it. It's so. It's a deep point, actually, in terms of the Lamrim. It's very doubtful to me whether we can make a lot of, whether we can really get the full benefit of these teachings if we don't take seriously the idea that the mind continues from life to life, and that the experience we have in one life is a karmic consequence of the actions we do in another one, a previous one. So that's a fundamentally important point. There's maybe lots of things about the Tibetan Buddhist worldview and cosmology that we don't have to take on board literally. But there is there's a strong school of thought in Western Buddhism at the moment that rebirth is it's not really necessarily part of Buddhism. And even question whether the Buddha taught it. I mean, if you read the sutras in the Pali Canon, which are the earliest records we have of what the Buddha taught and thought to be the nearest to the authentic. You read those sutras and you come to the conclusion the Buddha didn't talk rebirth. You must be reading them a very different way from how I read them. So every single sutra practically is in detail talking about karma and rebirth. So I don't think that it is a peripheral aspect of the Buddha's teaching, or that it's something that the Buddha just took on board because it was the general teaching at the time. As far as I understand it, the Buddha was actually one of the innovators of the doctrines of rebirth. The whole idea of kind of, this comprehensive theory of karma and all of these lower and higher realms, this is Buddhist. It's not pre-Buddhist. It wasn't there in the pre. So I think it's very, very central Buddhist teaching, actually, and I think particularly in any kind of, it's very difficult to relate meaningfully to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, for sure, without taking it seriously. But I think if you take the idea of rebirth out of Buddhism, it's very questionable whether what you've got left is Buddhism. It might be something quite good and useful, fine, but I wouldn't call it Buddhism, because it's so fundamental to so many of the Buddha's teachings. So really, I think, however difficult we find it, my conclusion is we really should try to engage very seriously with this idea if we want to follow the Buddhist path in any way, if we it is integral to the Buddhist message. And to do that, I think we need to meditate on it and think about it and discuss and debate it and listen to teachings, and we can come to our own conclusions after a serious investigation. But I think it is all too easy to sort of dismiss it and say, oh, well, this is Buddhism coming to the West. It's going to sort of do without that idea. I'm not so sure. Certainly, in terms of the Lamrim, very difficult to kind of reconstruct it so that we can do without the idea of rebirth. So we're going to kind of, I'm going to alternate between kind of taking it for granted, because in order to explain the teachings, we have to assume that background of rebirth. But then we will also try and look at it in detail, to kind of do some real sort of discussion, debate, because it's so important, I think. So maybe next week we could have a little bit of, I think next week and the week after we'll be looking at this, because we're looking at this topic, and actually all through this initial scope, all 4 topics really are very much connected with it. So we'll explore it, and we'll really try to get to grips, and I want you to be very open about your questions and doubts, and let's really kind of see what we think, because it's not an easy thing to get to the bottom of this topic. So if we do take that as the background, then without any doubt, to have not just a human rebirth, but a precious human rebirth, thank you, Fiona, precious human rebirth with all of these 18 conditions is incredibly rare. To say 1 in a million is underestimating it hugely. It's 1 in a million, How come we have created that opportunity? It's kind of extraordinary, we think about it. And that's the message, that's being kind of pushed home here. Once we realize we've been suffering in samsara lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, now we have the chance to get out. Now we have the chance to, go beyond that cycle of suffering, and even beyond that, go to reach a state where we can free others, save others from that suffering. We have this opportunity right now. Who knows if we will have it again next time? Well, we will if we create the causes. If we don't create the causes, we can't expect it to happen. So that's all very easy to understand, and it takes a lot of work to really get that, internalize that message so that it really changes our actions, begins to really affect how deeply and how seriously we practice. But that's the purpose. So we can study many advanced topics, but if we don't generate this kind of heart motivation to really want to it's not just about intellectual learning, that's very important, but there's something else about, really changing the mind, transforming the mind. This is what it is. To do that, we need to develop a very powerful motivation, because the mind is very resistant to being transformed. And so, again, it's good to abstain from beating ourselves up. It's like, it's not you personally that are not very good. It's like, that is the nature of the mind. The mind is a creature of habit. So we've been, our habit has been, lifetime after lifetimes, mostly sort of, actually very often in a lot of these Laram texts, some of them quite sort of, it's a really strong message, but all these lifetimes we've just been 99.99% of the time creating negative karma, Oh my God. I don't know if it's as bad as that, or if that's just kind of something they're saying to really wake us up. But we've not been creating the really kind of, the really positive causes that we need in order to get to our spiritual goal. So to do that, we need to really kind of, do something that will galvanize our mind. So they use many examples like, Lama Zopa says, our permanent address is the lower realms. Most of the time we're in the hell realms. And then some of the time we're in the hungry ghost realms or the animal realm. And just once in a blue moon we're in the human realm. And even then probably don't have the full conditions. And there's the famous example from Shantideva of the blind turtle who swims in the bottom of the ocean, and every 100 years he pops his head up and he's hoping to put his head into a golden yolk that's floating on the great ocean, or it's floating all around the world. He comes up every 100 years. How often is he going to put his head through the golden yolk, this blind turtle? Or there's another one about sort of, throwing sesame seeds against a wall or something. How often do they stick to the wall? But the idea is that, it's just incredibly rare. And then once we have it, we don't know how long we've got it for. So that leads into the next meditation on death and impermanence, which we'll look at next week. So, okay. We have this opportunity right now. Without this, we are stuck in samsara until who knows when. If we lose this opportunity and we fall back to the lower realms, in the kind of the animal realm or the hell realm or the preta realm, we're not, in that situation, very, very difficult to create any positive karma at all, actually. So it's up for grabs how many times, or how many thousands of times, or how many millions of times we're going to go through being reborn in a suffering realm before we come back and have this opportunity again. So I don't know, how literally we need to take the maths, if you like, but we can see very simply, just looking at the human world, how few people, one of the conditions is to actually have interest in spiritual practice. Without that, it's no good. We might have all the other conditions. We might have, there might be gurus around every corner. There might be, we have very good intelligence and everything. But if we're not interested in spiritual practice, we're not going to go anywhere. We're just going to go back down again. It's guaranteed, So if you look around, how many people are seriously interested in doing spiritual practice? Maybe more than there were, 20, 30 years ago. Maybe it's a positive trend, but it's still a very small number of people. A reasonable number of people have a slight interest. Very few people have a really serious interest, I would say, in spiritual practice. So there's a percent, if you were to do a survey, YouGov or whatever, I don't know, but it's not many. And that is among people who, in all the other ways, they all have very, very fortunate circumstances. Most people, for one reason or another, there's nothing available. In most parts of Africa, or large parts of the world, this kind of teaching is very rare to be found. There may be people that have some interest, but they kind of can't find any authentic teachings, or difficult to find anywhere to practice. So it's a tiny minority of the human world that really have all of those full conditions. And even just to have a human body is, from a karmic point of view, is incredibly rare opportunity. So if we really do appreciate this, like, I'm trying to think of an analogy to compare it to, but it's kind of like something drops through your letterbox, and unbeknownst to you, you've won a around the world tour. You get like it's just what you've always dreamed of, a kind of round the world cruise. Going to all the places you'd grab it. You'd grab the opportunity if that was something that really was important to you. You wouldn't just sort of, I'll have a look at that sometime. You'd be really motivated. That kind of thing. Or I don't know. You're a musician and you get an offer to play at Carnegie Hall. It's that kind of thing, an incredible opportunity lands on your plate. Do we have that kind of response? Wow, I'm not going to let this one slip by me. That's what the lamas are trying to, engender in us. I'm not going to let this one slip. Seize the opportunity. This is amazing. This is incredible. And when you read the biographies of any of these great lamas or great teachers from the Zen traditions or other spiritual traditions, you find this, that the turning point was somewhere where they realized that this was something to really kind of seize hold of, to not let go, to practice with complete determination. I'm not going to lose this opportunity. I'm going to, make sure that I derive the full benefit from this opportunity, this spiritual path that is in front of me. So this meditation, we use it together with the meditation on death and impermanence, which we will look at next time, it comes right at the beginning, because really the first thing that we need, if we're going to do more than just have an interesting experience of finding out about some different philosophy of life, but really to transform our minds, which is the real purpose, then the first thing that we need is this very strong motivation, this hunger, this real kind of, there's a word for it in the Theravada tradition, is very good actually, because the word that the Buddha uses for the cause of suffering is the word in Pali tanha, or in Sanskrit tushna. Tushna, as you might guess, means thirst. Tanha is the Pali, and it's translated usually as craving, but it originally means thirst. It's like if you are really kind of you've had no water for 3 days. Like thirst is one of the most powerful driving forces in the mind, is thirst. So it is the craving for sensual pleasure, the craving for, what he calls bhavana, becoming existence, which is things like reputation, to have grasping onto an identity. These are the 4 things that cause suffering. But there is also another mental factor called nirodha tanha. So nirodha means cessation. So the craving or the thirst for liberation from samsara. This is a positive mental factor, So it's described with the same word. It's like this really, really powerful motivation. I want to be free from samsara. Authentic, sincere, genuine. This is really what I care about. This is the thing that's most important to me. This is the meaning of my life, is to follow this path to become free, in this case, free from samsara. But of course, from Mahayana point of view, yes, we need to develop that, and then we also kind of add on to it the bodhicitta. It's a kind of more further level of motivation. But first of all, we need to have this, of course, here we're talking about the initial level of motivation. So here it's like the drive or the strong desire and motivation to to not fall down to the lower realms, to be free from that, to be free even from this kind of gross suffering of the lower realms. That's the starting point. So these 2 meditations we kind of practice together. They support one another. Lama Yeshe was very strong on this. That talking about particularly the death and meditation on death and impermanence. He said, this should be our meditation. This is the meditation we should do, because when we do that meditation seriously, it turns the mind towards Dharma. Whereas we can do all sorts of other meditations, more advanced things and emptiness and so on. And although it's beneficial, it's not saying that it's not good, but we don't have that real kind of, on a very kind of fundamental level, the mind, our interest, our, the things that we're attracted to, the things that we want to do, start to become anything to do with the spiritual path, rather than any of these other non-spiritual things that at the moment are kind of distracting and seducing us away from our spiritual practice. So we become spontaneously motivated. It's not like, that we force ourselves to do Dharma because we know it's good for us, but we start to really want it. So that's the purpose. Okay, so I've said enough. So I'll have a bit of time for questions, and then we'll do some meditation. Okay, so any questions on the topic? It's all very clear? Okay.
I think the realms are the most difficult, aren't they?
And initially they are difficult because, our first of all, in our culture, the view is very much that what we can see and hear is, I'll believe it if I see it, So it's what is kind of, we can objectively verify through observation of the senses. There are, however, many other kinds of experience which that point of view ignores or, discounts. So many people have experiences of like there's something in this room, and and it's kind of, it has a good feeling or a bad feeling, but there's somebody else here. Those experiences are very common, and of course in most cultures around the world they're interpreted in a fairly sort of straightforward way. Well, yeah, and often there is a quite reasonable explanation that it's something to do with somebody who lived in that place, or but the prevailing view at the moment is anything like that, we find a way to explain it away, because it can't be real, because we can't measure it with our scientific instruments and we can't see it with our eyes. But in so many cultures around the world, as the Dalai Lama observes, these things, very similar accounts of the different realms, in quite independently in different cultures. How come? And increasingly now, there's sort of, and I probably mentioned this before, I went to a very interesting lecture recently by a professor at London University who's been doing a lot of research on some of the phenomena of kind of like out-of-body experiences and people, recollecting previous lives and all of these things. And there's a lot of, now of course, many sort of academic scientists would say, well, that's all very well, she's managed to get that through the sort of, academic filters and whatever, and she's managed to get, but of course we know that can't be true, because it's an assumption, isn't it? It's like any evidence that's brought, any reasonings that are brought are just sort of, because they conflict with the assumptions, the axioms of our worldview, they can't be taken seriously. But there's more and more of this evidence that's coming up, and some of it's really very impressive. Of course, it depends on your starting point. If your starting point is, if it doesn't fit in with the materialistic worldview, it can't be true, then probably no amount of evidence will convince you, because you'll say, well, it's been faked, or it's coincidence, or, all of these things. To me, I've seen so much of it now, I kind of... And another thing that I find, again, this is something that doesn't carry much weight, I think, in the present sort of view, but some of the people that talk about it as being their own experience are people who I know are extremely, extremely wise, highly intelligent, highly educated, people like the Dalai Lama, people like Tenzo Palmo has some very interesting stories to tell. Now, she's a really, down-to-earth, extremely intelligent, sharp person. She's got some amazing stories. She's nobody's fool, but she can tell you things. So when you've heard it enough from people like that, who are not, they're not credulous, they're not stupid people at all, but they've had direct experiences. So I guess, my sort of, what I would say about it, if you come into it with an open mind, and you investigate it seriously, and you kind of, not being credulous, but just weighing it up, the balance of the evidence, you're likely to come down, well, it's probably true, even though, we can't see it or measure it with the scientific instruments we've got at the moment. Of course, there is a lot of nonsense out there as well, so be quite careful to discriminate. There are people, and there are a lot of people who have all sorts of experiences and put interpretations onto them, and they can be very unreliable. So it is a middle way, again, like everything in Buddhism, it's a middle way between just believing everything and not believing anything. You have to find the balance for yourself where you fit it. But as I say, the thing that is most convincing to me is the idea of karma itself, because you can see it. You can see it in this life. You can see how people, by doing something very deluded and misguided, they destroy their lives. Their life falls apart and they have all sorts of terrible experiences. And you can see that makes perfect sense. If you did that, that was bound to happen. So if somebody does something like that, so just an example, somebody murders somebody in a really kind of vicious way, but they don't, and then they kind of die reasonably soon afterwards. So those consequences don't come home to roost in this life. If their mind is going to carry on, what's going to happen to them next time? Because that, those karmic causes are there. They have distorted their own mind in a way by doing that in such a way that what they're going to, the experiences they're going to move towards as they go through the bardo and then as they go into their next life, they've created such negative tendencies in their mind by doing that they are going to, they're going to encounter terrible suffering. It's just the same principle that is carrying on from one life through into the next. It's not anything different. So I think this is very important, because even if we have a lot of doubt about rebirth, but still to understand and observe in practice how karma plays out in this life is very good. It's like it can really help us to see the way that we need to change ourselves. So here are the things that I'm doing that maybe if I look into it carefully and think, what experiences are these actions leading to? What am I creating for myself down the road? And I think to do that, we don't have to, just take on faith, some kind of, Buddhist formula about, well, if you kill somebody, you go to the hell realm, and if you steal something, you go to the hungry ghost. It isn't like that. We can see it. We can observe it in our own lives. And I think if we don't do that, karma's a bit meaningless, really. Do you understand what I'm saying about karma? It's an interesting observation that one Buddhist teacher made about it, actually. He said that the Sanskrit word karma is from the same root as the Greek word drama. Interesting. Which it means act. But karma means action. Drama is an act, isn't it? Yeah? And if you watch soap operas, they're all constructed from karma. And if somebody's, if what happens to somebody isn't congruent with the way that they're acting, we think that they've got it wrong. You can see it. But he did that, and now he's having a good time. That doesn't make sense. He wouldn't be. He would be having a lot of problems if he'd done that terrible thing. And so the writers got it wrong. Good soap operas, even though they might be sort of not very high as kind of literary art, but they hold you gripped because you see somebody doing something. No, don't do that! Don't! Oh my God! And then they do it, and then it happens. They think that they think that everything's going to be fine and dandy because they've taken the shortcut kind of, to get what they want, and they've done something really kind of unscrupulous and dodgy, and and they get the thing, and then it comes back to hit them. It's just very simple. What it is, like a boomerang. It's going to come back and hit you if you do that.
It's hard though, isn't it? If you've got somebody that you know has been a really good person, and then they get hit by a bus or something really bad happens to them.
Yeah.
How does that all fit in? That would be past karma catching up, Buddhists would say, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's quite hard to...
But how do you know they've been like that all their life? Again,
it's just that...
Yeah, and I mean, things like that. First of all, we have an assumption about what is a good karmic result, you know. And there's that saying about he was too good for this world. Somebody dies young, and people say he was too good for this world. And I've come across some really startling examples of that. Somebody there's Graham Dyer, who was he's a tanker painter. And he came on the first tanker course that we had at Jamyang Leeds. Actually, he came on it, and he's extremely gifted. And he very soon was painting these beautiful tankers. He was a real spiritual practitioner, and everybody thought he was such a nice guy. And he was a young chap. He was in good health, and suddenly, boom, he's gone. Where did he go? Now everyone's very sad, but maybe it was literally he's too good for this world. And he created all of a good karma, and he's gone somewhere better. How do we know? You know? If that person has been good all their lives, and they've been hit by a bus, they go somewhere good. We are sad. They might be very happy. Oh, thank God I got out of that terrible place. There's a lovely story in that extraordinary book called Fire Under the Snow, which is Palden Gyatso. There's this monk who was imprisoned and tortured for 33 years in Tibet, and finally escaped. And he said that, you know, they asked him, why did you survive for 33 years when all the people around you were dying, thousands of people, almost everybody who was in, you know, who was there when he was first put in prison, they were all dead. And he said, because I was determined to get out and tell the world about it. You know, I was going to survive. And he did. And he said, in the concentration camps or prisons where they were in, it was very interesting, like the different attitudes that people had towards death. And he gave this example. There was a monk in there who was, he said he was really sort of amazing man, because he in these terrible conditions, he was always kind of, you know, encouraging everybody and being sort of nice and cheerful and sort of reassuring people, helping people. But then one day, the chats they did quite frequently, their chats would come out and they would say, right, we're going to execute some people today, you're going to be executed. And this monk, who had seemed like such a great spiritual practitioner, he was kind of groveling on the ground saying, no, don't, I'll do anything, don't kill me. Another guy, a lay person, he said, this guy, they came to him and said, we're going to execute you today. And he said, thank you. He said, and they quoted this Tibetan proverb that says, it is good to have a long, happy life, but it is better to have a short, unhappy life. Now, that's somebody that really believes in karma. Yeah, as far as he was concerned, like he was in this hellish situation, and they were going to liberate him. Thank you so much. You can look at it different ways, you know. Okay. Should we stop there? Do some meditation? Okay. So let's just take a few minutes to settle the busy mind. There are all sorts of thoughts whizzing about, I have no doubt. We just focus for a few moments on relaxing the body. And focus on the breathing for a few moments. And so we're going to spend a few minutes just reflecting on our good fortune that we have at this moment. We are enjoying what is known as a precious human rebirth, or sometimes called a perfect human rebirth. So, although we tend not to think in this way, the reality is that right now we have complete, perfect conditions in order to be able to practice the Dharma, practice the spiritual path. So more commonly, we think about all the difficulties and obstacles that we face. We don't have enough time to practice. We haven't got the ideal conditions. Maybe we think, my guru is a long way away. I can't receive teachings from him. But if instead we focus on the positive conditions that we do have, that many beings lack, we will start to feel very differently about our situation. So we need to reflect on what I call these freedoms. These are the conditions we need to be free from in order to be able to practice. So right now, we are free from experiencing a rebirth in the hell realms. However we think of them, these are states of experience in which beings suffer continuous and extreme mental and physical suffering. So in terms of the fact that the mind has the capacity to have such experiences, there's no doubt. Why shouldn't that be possible? In terms of whether beings create the karmic causes for such a rebirth, it's very easy to see that many beings are creating extremely negative karmic causes right now. Logically, therefore, there must be many beings who are suffering these states of hellish experience. In the human realm, there's an analogy. People who live in war zones, such as places like Syria at the moment, or places where there is extreme famine. Many places around the world where the human beings are suffering extreme, continuous hardship, pain, torture, many kinds of suffering. According to the Dharma teachings, these are just an example that shows us, in a small way, the vast and terrible sufferings of the lower realms of samsara, the hungry ghost realms, where beings wander for hundreds of years, continuously tortured by hunger and thirst, and intense attachment. Again, it's easy to see that there are beings now creating the causes for such a rebirth. According to the Dharma, there are vast numbers of such beings wandering lost in a situation where for them to even think of spiritual practice is virtually impossible. In the animal realm, as well as often intense suffering, being eaten alive or imprisoned in cages and so on. But even those animals in a relatively fortunate circumstance have no opportunity whatsoever to practice a spiritual path, improve their minds, move towards liberation and enlightenment. They're simply impelled by the force of their own delusions and ignorance, creating mostly negative karma, going on to more suffering experiences. So freedom from rebirth in hell realm, freedom from rebirth as a hungry ghost, freedom from rebirth as an animal. Without these freedoms, it is impossible to practice Dharma. The fourth freedom is said to be freedom from rebirth as a long life God. So even though those in the God realms have accumulated much positive karma in order to have such a rebirth, nevertheless it is not such a favorable state in which to practice Dharma, because owing to that temporary freedom from suffering that they experience, sensual pleasure, powers and so on, it's very, very, very difficult indeed for all those beings to generate any real spiritual motivation. They simply rest on the laurels of their good karma until it runs out, and they then fall down to the lower realms again. Ultimately, then, even this is without meaning. So it is said that in this human realm, where there is a right balance of favorable karma, freedom from suffering, but also the presence of suffering that serves to motivate us. This is the ideal situation in which to practice Dharma. But even then, we need other freedoms. So right now we have these. We have the freedom from rebirth in a so-called dark aeon, when no enlightened being has appeared and taught the spiritual path. At such times, even though we have the potential to practice Dharma, there is no Dharma there to be practiced. This is not our situation. Shakyamuni Buddha has come, taught the complete spiritual path, and many other enlightened beings since have come and continued to turn the wheel of the Dharma for our benefit. This is a very rare and fortunate situation. We also have the freedom from rebirth in a land where not even a word of Dharma is to be found. And this again is quite unusual. There are many places around the world where the Dharma teachings simply have not reached. But here we have a situation where the complete Mahayana Dharma and the Vajrayana teachings are all available. So we have all of these favorable conditions. Also we have another very important freedom. Freedom from rebirth with impaired physical and mental faculties. So there are many people who have all of these first 6 conditions, but because their mental and physical faculties are damaged, they don't have the ability to practice. And finally we have the freedom from rebirth, holding fixed wrong views. This is very, very important. In fact, the great majority of people in our own society here, in this country, in the West generally, have all of the first 7 freedoms, but they don't have the 8th. People have strong, fixed belief in a materialistic worldview, will have no interest in practicing Dharma. They will reject it. Therefore, though they have all the other conditions, they don't have a precious human rebirth. We have all of these 8 freedoms, extremely rare. We also have the 10 favorable conditions, 10 endowments. Some of them somewhat similar. I won't go through the full list. Maybe these 8 freedoms is a good place to start. So we have all those conditions which very, very few beings, so you consider the vast number, even just human beings, animals, never mind the lower realms, which are far, according to the Dharma teachings, far more vast. Incredibly rare opportunity that we have now, that not only have we the fortune to be able to hear the basic Dharma teachings, how to practice moral discipline, beyond that we can hear teachings on the Four Noble Truths, the 3 higher trainings, the complete path leading to liberation, permanent, total freedom from all forms of suffering. That in itself, an extraordinary, extremely rare, almost inconceivable benefit. Most people, even religious people, are not aware of that possibility, or if they are aware of the possibility, they really don't know the means, the correct method to practice. Even beyond that, we have the fortune to encounter the Mahayana Dharma. This is rare even among sincere spiritual practitioners. To hear, even just to hear teachings on the complete path to full enlightenment. If we could appreciate unbelievable preciousness of this opportunity, we would undoubtedly practice very determinedly and very diligently. But we need to train our minds to appreciate these things. It's not enough just to hear these teachings once. We need to meditate, contemplate them again and again, and slowly our minds will turn towards the Dharma. Slowly our motivation, instead of being mostly focused on the things of this life, will more and more become dedicated to the spiritual path. So this meditation is fundamentally important to our Dharma practice. This in a way is the foundation that we can build on. The more we do these basic meditations from the beginning of the Lamrim, even though we may not be able to impress people with our extensive Dharma knowledge, but much more importantly, our mind will become spiritual in its orientation. Our mind will begin to transform into the Dharma itself. Then there is a real possibility that we will enter the path leading to the inconceivable bliss of full enlightenment. The path that will enable us not only to free ourselves, but to free others from suffering completely. So let's just spend a few minutes silently reflecting on this tremendous good fortune that we have somehow created the causes to experience. Because we don't know for how long we have this opportunity. If we generate a true appreciation for it now, then we will not lose it. A dedication. Please spend a few moments reflecting on the meaning of dedication, the merit that we've created, the positive karma that we've created this evening and throughout this past week, throughout our lives. Generate a strong aspiration, an intention or a prayer. May this positive karmic potential ripen or become the cause for myself to be able to progress on the spiritual path, ultimately to attain full enlightenment. for the benefit of others. Page 22. Chum Sem Chuk Rinpoche Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyo Chik Ke Wanyam Pa Me Pa Yan Gong Ne Gong Du Pel Wa Shong Ke Wadi Nyor Du Da Lama Sangye Ru Gyone Chua Chi Kyang Ma Lu Pa Te Yi Sa La Ge Va Sho. Long Life Prayers. Tzu Chang Jing Jam Ge Gel Wei Dan Jin Ge Bel Wei Kun Ze Dog Por Ze Chok Sum Kur Wei Leg Mun Tu Dru Pa Dak Sok Du Je Gen Du Shap Ten Jong Gong Ri Ra Wei Kar Wei Shin Kam Dir Pendang Dewa Malu Jung Wei Ne Chen Re Zi Wang Tenzin Gatso Yi Jape Si Te Badu Tengyo Chi. Okay.
For homework.
Sorry?
For homework. Do you want us to start doing the Lam meditations?
Yes. So if this meditation and there's quite a lot of good detail on it in it's a very short chapter 4, but so based on that chapter and on the meditation tonight, so please include this. And again, this is something you can, if you have another meditation that's your main practice, this is something you can do like 5 minutes at the beginning to really kind of just get that, sharpen your motivation.